Welcome to Solutions OP Clinical Trials Podcast. My name is Olga and I'm the Managing Director of Solutions OP. We are a small team of experienced professionals working on clinical trials in the United Kingdom. I'll use our podcast to discuss hot topics in clinical trials and provide analysis of the latest trends and challenges in pharma and medical device industries, not just in the UK but globally. Thank you for listening. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. Today, my guest is Harry Henson, who is the Associate Director of RBW Consulting. So RBW Consulting is an international recruitment agency, and I'm sure all of us who work in clinical research are familiar with them because they specialize in life sciences. So Harry has worked in the field for many years with different recruitment agencies before joining RBW Consulting. And I invited him today not only because he's an expert in recruitment and could provide us with professional advice, but also because he's one of those recruiters who spend time to speak to job seekers and understand their situation and then provide an open feedback about the job interviews. And he genuinely tries to help job seekers and his clients. And I think this is something very valuable, and we don't see a lot with so many recruiters these days. So thank you, Harry, for joining me today.
That's all right. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind words as well.
So I'll start with my first question, which is, what is the current situation with the clinical research job market, with the contract and permanent, and how difficult it is for young people who've just graduated to find job, and let's try not to be very depressing at the same time.
Okay, so putting it politely, it's pretty tough out there at the moment, and that's not, I don't think that's a problem that's kind of unique to the UK or unique to contract or permanent. I think the current global climate that we're in is affecting the job market in not just in clinical research but in kind of every field. But yeah, I think at the moment it is one of the toughest job markets that I've seen. However, there are still definitely positives that you can take from it in the overall clinical research job market. I think we at RBW, definitely on ClinOps, and I think in the broader business as well, have noticed in the last kind of 2 to 3 months, we've seen an uplift, thankfully, in the UK in permanent jobs, in permanent recruitment. And I think it's been a steady increase globally on contract hiring as well. I'm by no means saying it's busy, but it is definitely busier than more recent times. I think that the last 2 years, so I've worked in recruitment for over 10 years, and I think the last 2 years specifically in the ClinOps market have been a couple of the toughest that I've ever seen. But it does feel like we're starting to, I don't want to say come out the other side of it, but we're starting to think about coming out the other side of it, with a few things kind of bubbling away in the background, steady increases. I think all it will take is some serious investment on the sponsor side for then the work to start trickling through, most likely the larger CROs first, and then finding its way down to some of the smaller and mid-sized CROs, and that in turn should create a busy market again. But I would love to be able to tell you how soon I think that would be, or even a rough timeline, but if I could only do that if I had a crystal ball, because at the moment it would just be guesswork. But if we can take a positive from it, it's that we are seeing things get kind of steadily busier.
Yeah, I see. And how about the entry-level jobs? Because many young people, they're looking for entry-level jobs. So how is that going on? Is it the same, or is it a little bit better? What is your impression?
I actually think it's probably a better time in general for entry-level jobs in clinical research, and in particularly in ClinOps. We have seen, I think this is something that maybe I don't want to say affects recruitment agencies negatively, but it's something where there's been a lot more companies, maybe where budgets have been slightly stricter. We have seen a lot more companies, both CRO and sponsor, making hires at a more junior level. I think that it depends what way you look at it, because some people could view that as a higher risk because you're not hiring people with 5, 10, whatever years of CRA experience, if, say, it's for an entry-level CRA role. But you could also view it as, okay, well, this is someone who we can then hire at an entry level. We can train them how the company want them to be trained and what we promote internally. And then it also comes at a lower cost option. Obviously, sometimes it could be a lower cost. However, there could be higher churn, and there could be more people going in at entry level where then things don't work out, whether that is the client's choice or the candidate as such's choice. But I think on the whole, we are seeing more entry level roles, which companies obviously tend to hire themselves directly. And I'd say we've also seen a spike in industry companies hiring from public sector. So there's been, I think, a lot more that we've seen in the past couple of years where this market has been tougher, of where there has been maybe entry-level roles within industry, rather than taking someone on who's got zero experience or comes from like a CTA background. We're seeing maybe not-for-profit or public sector CRAs making the transition into industry. But I think, again, that creates a bit of another issue where companies are making those hires. The candidates coming from not-for-profit or public sector could potentially feel a little bit hard done by, because even if they've got 3 or 4 years of CRA experience, by the industry they're being then viewed as entry level and minimal experience. So it's a bit of a catch-22. I think it depends on the person and if they're happy to effectively transition sideways. I guess the positive that does come with that is industry does typically pay considerably more.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. The industry definitely pays a little bit more than non-profit sector. I agree on this one. And my next question, before I ask you my next question, I'll tell you a very interesting short story. I was working with a hospital last year, the UK NHS hospital, and they had a data entry person. They hired a data entry person based in South Africa. So it was, to me, it was quite interesting. So I asked them, I said, well, why would you hire someone in South Africa to do remotely data entry in the UK? And they said, because she's experienced. I mean, it's fair enough. She was really a lovely lady. I have no issue with her. But it just puzzles me that an NHS hospital in the UK will hire someone in South Africa to do data entry for them. And this is why I wanted to ask you my next question, which is, are there any initiatives that prevent employers from hiring and training young people in clinical research?
In my opinion, no. But there are, I think, something that we have seen across the board in all the kind of different verticals is in the tougher markets, people have looked to maybe outsource certain roles that they can to other countries, and I think a lot of that does come down to cost. Like we've got a couple of mid-sized CROs who we work with, who I'm sure wouldn't mind me saying that for a cost-saving exercise for them, they moved their data entry and IT functions to a lower cost country, and they set up a whole function in the new countries, because they worked out the amount of money that was actually then able to be saved by them as a business was kind of astronomical, and was then able to enable them to grow in other areas. But I think it's a shame, because it does feel like it is getting harder and harder for young people to get into clinical research in the UK, for example. But there shouldn't be anything preventing employers from hiring and training young people getting into clinical research. I think I think the public sector are much better advocates for it. And I think we are still seeing, it feels strange saying young people or younger people, I'm only 32, but yeah, it feels like the public sector are definitely kind of bigger advocates for that, and we are then seeing people trying to then make that transition into industry. And I know some of the larger CROs have gone through phases where they have had like their CRA academies, for example. But again, I don't think we see as much of that anymore. I do think, however, that it is a reflection of like the kind of global market that we're in. So I think if normality returns at some point, that we will see a kind of hiring shift again, and there will be more of a focus on getting young people into clinical research, and it will maybe become potentially easier again, because I think every company, well, I like to think most companies' kind of ideal hiring situation is you can have a mix of senior employees, whether that's freelance or permanent, mixing with kind of more entry-level, new to clinical research employees, because that creates such a good balance between the two, and I think that enables obviously the fresher CRAs or fresher people into clinical research to work with people who've been doing it for some time and pick up things, and at the same time some of the more senior candidates or people will still learn from the newer kind of employees and the fresher people to clinical research. I think some of them may even be surprised at how much they might learn from some of the younger people coming in.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. So when I say, young people, I mean those who are recent graduates, they've graduated university or school and they're looking for jobs. And the reality is there are many people who are interested in clinical research. They just don't know how to get in there. And we had a previous discussion with my colleague Lydia Ainsworth, because she graduated psychology and she was very interested in research. So we were talking about what kind of awareness was there for her that she can get into clinical research, and it wasn't a lot, actually.
Really?
And that's why I wanted to ask you, what would you recommend if you have someone who's graduated and is looking for clinical research job? What do you think is the best thing for them to do if they want to find an entry-level job?
I think my first kind of piece of advice would be don't give up and be patient, because it will take some time, but it will happen. I think if you want it enough and are focused enough on it, then you can make it happen. Because all it takes is, I know this firsthand from working in recruitment, how many no's you sometimes need to then get a yes. But if it takes you 10 applications, if it takes you 30, if it takes you 80, you will find the right thing for you. My advice would be flexible as well. I think as much as you may have like your ideal situation in your head, that say for example you want to go down the CRA route and you are thinking, right, I want an entry-level CRA job, maybe take into account the state of the current market and I guess your competition as well, because there are so many more experienced candidates out there, unfortunately, without work at the moment. I would say have some flexibility on what you're looking at. If the longer term goal is CRA, look at CTA, look at regulatory admin, look at maybe even further afield avenues on kind of getting into clinical research, whether that's TMF, whether that is looking at maybe down the QA route. It's maybe having a bit of a broader kind of set of job titles that you're looking at initially. I would say keep an eye out. This sounds really simple, but keep an eye out for vacancies where they will specify in the job title or like the first kind of summary, like they will consider entry-level candidates. That they are not as frequent as someone looking for a more experienced candidate, but there will be positions out there that will specify entry-level. And it takes, sometimes it does take a keen eye to spot them, but if you find them, they're not just saying entry level for the sake of it, they will genuinely consider candidates at an entry level. I think it's always good to, especially when looking for kind of your first job in clinical research, it's always good to make your CV stand out. I mean, I think a lot of people can fall into the trap, and I see this with experienced candidates as well, can fall into the trap of having a ton of buzzwords like great communicator, team player, all that kind of stuff on the CV, which is great. Still have that if you want it, because soft skills are super, super important, probably more so now than ever. But having those written on the CV isn't really going to make yours stand out from anyone else. I would say focus on what makes you stand out. Whether that is, like you say, recent graduate, whether it's awards or something from your dissertation or whatever that you've done at uni, whether it's some form of work experience you may have had within industry or public sector, and it's also then the follow-up. From working in recruitment for 10 plus years, I know that if I advertise a job, of course we're going to get a lot of applicants, but it's then the people who follow that up, whether it's an email or even better, a call, just to say, look, this is me, this is what I've applied for. Do you think it's suitable? If not, do you have anything that's suitable? And sometimes it is just a question of asking us for advice. I mean, as a recruiter, primarily for contractors, when I do get approached by entry-level candidates, I will often say, yeah, great, welcome to the industry. I would really recommend speaking with one of my colleagues who's got some excellent connections on kind of the permanent hiring front, because that is the best route to go down initially. And I've got a colleague, Joe, who's placed quite a few professionals from the NHS or not-for-profit or overall public sector into industry for their kind of first industry CRA job. I think RBW as a business will always try where we can to support candidates who are wanting to get into the industry at that kind of entry level. But yeah, I think now is a tough time to do it, but not to give up and to keep going.
Yeah, that's I think it's very important advice. Not to give up is really critical. But when we talk about the looking for a job, I mean, how do you find LinkedIn? For example, I find LinkedIn to be absolutely dead. There's so many advertisers, and when you look at it, there are like 1 million people who just applied in the previous 24 hours.
Yeah, and then you've got to think about the poor person who's got to sort through all the applications.
Yes, true.
But yeah, I think it's tough. It really varies again on the type of job. So we primarily use our main three kind of sources of advertising that we use are LinkedIn, FarmyWeb, and our kind of company website. FarmyWeb used to be where every CRA under the sun and every clinical candidate under the sun was on. We actually noticed a bit of a shift. We still get some excellent applications from FarmyWeb, and I think they do actually have a section on there for entry-level roles. I could be wrong, but I think they do. But we noticed a pretty big shift on clinical to LinkedIn within the last few years, of maybe the kind of, again though, for probably more senior level roles or more experienced candidates. But it is tough when you go to apply for a job and there are 400 applications within the first 2 days. And I get that could be, I guess, demoralising for someone, especially someone coming in at an entry level, thinking, right, well, the chances are, like, the competition is going to have 5, 10, 15, 20 years experience. So I would say when kind of applying for jobs, LinkedIn, when it is probably our best means of applicant. However, there are a lot of applicants, like you said, on LinkedIn. So it can feel like you are fighting a losing battle. So I would actually say as well, if you see some jobs, say like a senior CRA job, and you're looking for an entry level, I would just say to give yourself the peace of mind, do not apply for that one. Like look for something that says entry level. Look for something that even says like CRA 0 to 18 months experience or something like that. But I think, unfortunately, there are only a certain amount of, I guess, job sites and viable means of advertising and ways that candidates can apply. And I think that the don't give up message kind of rings through here as well. Is yes, it is going to be tough. It is by no means easy at the moment. But the LinkedIns, the Farmy Webs, the company websites direct, which in hindsight, company websites direct is probably, for an entry-level candidate, applying directly on a CRO or a biotech or a pharma's website is probably your best means, I think, initially of finding something at the moment. Because again, with the market in the position that it is, a lot of our partners who we work with are maybe a bit more, how do I put this nicely, a bit stricter on their budgets for recruitment agencies, and that often does fall with the junior positions that they would like to then go and find themselves. So I would say, yeah, looking on companies' websites directly is probably, for an entry level, if you want to go straight into industry, that is probably the most viable means of applying for a role, because you're also, you're kind of, whilst you're, I guess, missing out on using the agency for all the support through the process and all that kind of things, you are maybe putting yourself in a smaller pool of candidates, because I do think more candidates tend to apply via agencies in general. But I think for maybe those more junior positions, if you're applying directly to a company, I think there is probably a higher chance of you being successful within the process than there is if a company is paying a recruiter for that level of role.
Yeah, especially for the entry level ones, because they're not very well paid. And do you receive a lot of, I mean, when you advertise, for example, for an entry level job, do you receive a lot of applications from candidates who are completely not eligible for the country? Or, I mean, do you receive a lot of spam, or is it only really valid applications?
Nothing. I think this applies to pretty much any role we advertise. Unfortunately, now is we get a ton of irrelevant applications. I would say if I advertise a CRA role now, I would expect within a week probably to have over 500 applicants. I would anticipate over half of them probably not being in the right country, genuinely. And I would anticipate a lot of them kind of also being completely irrelevant skill set wise or background wise. And unfortunately, this is a problem that the recruitment industry has to deal with as a whole, and that then also has I guess a bit of a negative effect on applicants who are genuinely wanting to progress their career in this role, because I think every application, when there is such a high number, is met with a bit of skepticism as well. But it is a massive problem. People applying for stuff that is just completely irrelevant, unfortunately. But I don't think that's something that's going to change. I think that's a problem that we're having to adapt to, that has reared its head a bit more in the last few years, and doesn't unfortunately look like it's going away.
That's great. Well, on the positive side, at least when you see all these 1,000 applicants, you know that half of them are rubbish, so you have a chance.
Yeah, that's true. So then you can whittle it down to 500 straight away. but then I guess it does. Then you do feel a certain sense of reward when you do then find the needle in the haystack. Yeah, it's a funny old world we live in at the moment.
Yeah, I think you can update your job title now to finding needles in the haystack.
My new strapline on LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Harry, for your time today to speak to me. And I would like to say in conclusion that it's very important, if you're just newly graduate and you want to find a job in clinical research, not to give up. That's our message.
Yes, definitely.
It's very hard. It's just, that's how the industry is. It's not just in the UK, it's an international problem. So don't give up, keep trying, work with the recruiters, find recruiters who are good like Harry and are willing to help you, and eventually you'll be successful. And thank you everyone for listening.